Hey everyone, it's Kim Allen from the reLeading podcast. Welcome. This is where you come when you want to figure out how you can pause and pivot and proceed with purpose in your career journey, which is really important. And what we're doing today, we have a really special guest. I'm going to introduce her in a second, but I just want to talk a little bit about my podcast. In that, just remember that everything that we're going to be talking about always comes under the umbrella of leadership effectiveness, especially effectiveness. That is the operative word, okay? So before we begin, I do have to say that I have a little bit of, it's kind of like a birthday and anniversary. But anyway, so my new book, which is called reEngage, it's how to master the art of intentional engagement. Actually, it's 2 weeks old. So it's available to you through e-reader and Amazon. And also just know that shortly, and I will let you know when, it's going to be available where all books are sold, just like my first book. Okay. So thank you for your support. I really appreciate that. So now I want to introduce my very special guest, Roslyn Clark. Hi, Roslyn. Welcome.
Hello, Dr. Kim Allen. How are you?
I'm great now. I'm really great now. Okay. For all of you who are listening to this and you can't see it, Roz is wearing red, which I didn't tell you is the color of my second book, reEngage. It's red. So I'm not sure that Roz did that on purpose, but it's much appreciated. Okay. So before we begin, Roz, is it okay if I tell everyone a little bit about your background? I'd like to set the stage and let them know why you're here, what your expertise is, and that will help them understand what our conversation will be like today.
Of course.
All right. So here we go. Roslyn Clark is a director of training and development for employee engagement for a healthcare system in California. And she does a lot there. She does a lot of the curriculum design. Well, she does the curriculum design, I should say, designing and developing, leading the culture within an organization. She's charged with that, looking at the cultural the organizational framework, which is really an important job for us to have. Created and leads a 168-member ambassador team to support the culture and development across the organization. And also prior to that, she's been a lot, you're going to hear that a lot from her, a lot with training. She is deeply ensconced in training and development. And prior to that, she spent a lot of her early years in her career, in her journey with pharmaceuticals, where she was a field development director, spent a lot of time with strategic partnering with human resources teams, and again, creating programs, and also a career development network. So we're really starting to get a flavor for what her scope is at this point. And also she established a women's mentor program that was adopted nationally. Raj, you get extra points for doing that. I love women who support women. Again, she was senior account director, managed markets, regional sales director. Roz, I'm saying that you're also from California, so you spend a lot of time working within that division. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. And a lot of time in the home office, corporate as well, okay, on the East Coast.
Right. I think Roz was in the plane more than she was on the ground with her background, right? Again, a regional business manager. So she has a lot of experience with business, with leadership, with HR. Roz, I wrote down here, and I really want to talk about that in a second, but what really piqued my interest is that you do a lot from the point of reference of patient experience. And that's really important because patients are the clients. But then again, people who work in organizations, one department is the client of another department. So when we hear clients and we hear customers, it may give us pause to realize that someone who we're working with across function is actually a client of ours, right? So anyway, then I'm going through her resume right now still on her third page. Gosh, you've done so much. Roz has a Bachelor of Science from California State University in Northridge, a Master's of Business Management in University of Redlands, additional management development, financial management from the Wharton School of Business, advanced marketing strategies from Strategic Management Group, positive negotiation seminar, situation management systems, and management development from a large pharmaceutical organization. All right, you know what? I need a nap after I just was describing Roslyn Clark's background, okay? That's a lot that you bring to the table.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Kim.
Yeah.
I do. You mentioned something when you were talking about connecting points of the client. Actually, I do work in a large healthcare system. And one of the books that has also been instrumental is something called Patients Come Second. And in a healthcare system, why would patients come second? Because it basically supports everything you speak about in reEngage. Our team members and our leaders and anybody working in the system needs to come first so that we can fill their cup to make sure they're delivering the best to those we serve externally.
Right.
So it really feeds into everything you've talked about in your book, reEngage.
You know, it's really interesting that you say that, because I also come from a pharmaceutical and healthcare, spent a lot of my career in hospitals. And our perspective changes when we are engaging with patients because we have that empathy.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They need us. It's an emotional engagement that we have, right? Whereas we don't necessarily have that mindset when we're in a business environment. We may not have that empathy because truly the patient is the client. But when your patient is Bob from accounting,
yes,
do we afford Bob that same empathy when we engage with him?
We would hope so. We would hope so, because at the end of the day, there's internal customers and external customers.
Yeah.
And the way we talk about engagement, or the way we talk about our organizational culture, is to ensure we have compassionate, connected care for both.
Yes.
Because each one serves each other in different ways.
It's true. I agree with that completely. You know, so we're kind of getting into it, but before we get into it, because I have a lot of questions for you, and but I do have this, I'm going to pause and pivot to fun. So I'm going to ask a couple of questions of Roslyn Clark, because I think everyone gets the feel for Roz, that you are a pro, you're a heavy hitter, you've done it all, and now you're turning that around and you're creating all these great development programs for leadership and for other employees as well. So your scope is quite large. That's great. But you know what? I like to have fun, because you know we're so serious all the time. Enough of the seriousness, right? Okay, so I'm going to ask you 3 questions, okay? And the first one, I'm going to ask you the first 2. All right. So you can answer, and it's not hard. You don't need to prep for this. Okay. Now that we know Roz in the big scope of her resume, your bio, and what you're doing right now, the first question, the second question I'll ask you, what is something that we need to know about Roslyn Clark? And what is something that's nice to know about Roslyn Clark?
Oh my goodness. What we need to know is that I think the work I do today comes right from the heart. And when I joined patient experience for this large health system, it was interesting because I spent many, many years caring for a loved one who was on the front end of the health system that I currently now am on the back end of. And so when I speak from experience, and it's heartfelt, because I know what that kindness means when you speak to somebody. I know what engagement feels like versus a transactional communication, and the difference it clearly makes and the impact it makes. I know generational differences. And when somebody approaches me, and how it feels if it's too casual on a serious nature, because I come from a different generation. So those are things I think are not just nice to know, they are need to know. They are need to know when you're communicating.
Okay, I like that, but I'm still going to ask you that second question again, because first of all, I'm sorry that you had to go through something really difficult with a loved one, but what that has done, because that was a terrible thing, I'm sure, but what it has done is you're paying it forward for other people, that's just amazing. That's just really an amazing aspect of Roslyn Clark. But that's the need to know, but what's the nice to know about Roz?
Okay, and nice to know. And nice to know is that why I still do what I do is because I have such passion and purpose. When I was reading reEngage, Dr. Kim, I was reading an echo of myself, because I am so, well, what I call it, I'm so passionate about engagement. And part of it is maybe my extrovert personality, but more of it is if we don't re-engage, if we do not engage, then we don't have a conversation. So nice to know about me is that I have passion and purpose when I'm doing this. I don't do the work I do for just the remuneration nor the money. I do it because I really believe it makes a difference. And that's a nice to know about me.
Yeah, and I can feel that from you. So for the audience, you may not know this, but this is the third time within 30 minutes that we've attempted this podcast because my platform, StreamYard, is not cooperating. Okay. So Roz, did I talk about how we met and why you're here? The story with the book? Okay. Because I think I said it on the other 2 tries, but this is the try that's sticking. So I'm going to go with that. All right. So the interesting thing about Roz is that she heard I was writing this book about re-engagement. And she contacted me saying, oh my gosh, this is what I do for a living. Roz is a practitioner of everything that is in my book. I'm holding up my book again for anyone who is actually just listening to this. But Roz actually said, she had read the book and she said, we could finish each other's sentences because she's seeing exactly what I wrote about. Mm-hmm. And again, I understand her passion for doing this too. So anyway, I just thought that was a really interesting story that I'm telling for the 3rd time because finally we're getting a recording that's working. Not that you care, but I had to share that with you. Okay. All right. So the final fun question, I'm going to ask, these are 2 quick questions, so don't think about it. Roslyn Clark, what was your first concert? What was your best concert?
Oh my goodness, those are easy. My first concert was the Iron Butterfly, so you know how old I might be.
I love it.
Was that the 15-minute In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida? I don't remember. Oh my gosh. And clearly, my best concert was a country concert with Blake Shelton.
Okay.
Probably it was pre-pandemic and my daughter and I went and it was, you get that meet and greet and there's just nothing quite like it for somebody you really admire. So that was my best concert for sure.
I love it. I love asking that question because I have so many I have people from all different backgrounds, right? And I really do find out like, who were the heavy metal, the headbangers and the disco queens and country music. I love it. You know what? Truly, music is an equalizer. So whenever any of you are having a really difficult time with the team, you know what? Just pause and just sit back and ask everyone first concert, best concert. And I'll tell you why. This is the 2nd time I'm telling this story, but I dealt with bankers for a long time. And, we're sitting around the conference table and the pinstripe suits and everyone's like sitting up straight. And it was just not a dynamic situation for everyone until I actually asked that question. And, by the 3rd person, you could see the ties unloosening and, the women were taking off their blazers. And by the time we got to the last person, everyone was just so relaxed and they found out some really cool stuff that they were talking about to the person that they would never talk to in the hallway. It's actually humanizing.
Yes. No, you're so great. I asked what's everybody's favorite emoji because you can hear you can learn a lot. Yes.
Yes. Oh, I love that. All right. Okay. So we now know about Roz. We know her background. We know what's nice to know about her, what we need to know about her. And she knows a lot about Iron Butterfly. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, baby. All right. So now we're going to keep going here. Now we're going to get into it. All right. Because again, all kidding aside, re-engagement is a pretty interesting thing. I have a question for you, Rosalind. I keep calling you Roz. So your title again is Director of Training Development, Employee Engagement. So my question for you, again, it's a 2-pronged question. What does employee engagement mean for Roslyn? But what does employee engagement mean to your organization? Is it the same answer?
Oh my gosh, it keeps the wheels going around. It's all about a dialogue, not a monologue. Mm-hmm. We need to, we are not one spoke in the wheel. We have many spokes in a wheel that need that connection point. And engagement is everything to get that. It's engagement with our patients. My goodness, to ensure that they involve families in their care. It's engagement with our teammates to be sure that we keep the wheel turning. Mm-hmm. Engagement is everything, and purposeful engagement is even more important so that you have, when I was when I was a regional director, I remember doing so many interviews. And one of the, I will never forget the answer that this lady gave me when I asked her what changed her business. And she said, what changed her trajectory of her business? And she said, when I started asking questions I needed the answers to.
Oh,
That to me was purposeful engagement. Instead of just talking, think about what is it you need to learn, or what is it you really want out of this. And it's all about some of the Brene Brown stuff. Stay curious.
yeah.
Engagement.
Yep. Love that. Wow. It's almost like you read my book.
I did.
I know you did.
Your book was like a sponge. My head felt so much larger after I read it. It was fabulous.
You know what? That one thing that I have found, which is so interesting. Okay, so I'll give you a really interesting story. That I was in a huge hospital in Philadelphia, and I was selling surgeon's gloves, where I spent like tons of time in the operating room with the doctors and out in the hallway and talking about my glove. And people considered surgeon's gloves a commodity, which they're not. Not that you care, audience, but I actually brought in my glove mold because we had an independent thumb, and that was the selling point. And we converted the whole hospital. But I'll never forget that the person that was in charge of purchasing, he said, I have to tell you why we went with your company. I said, because of the independent thumb. He said, well, absolutely that, because it made the difference. I said, well, what was the other reason? He said, well, you were the only one that asked for the business. What?
Right.
What?
Right.
Right? I'm thinking all that education. I thought it was going to be like a bigger answer than that. But anyway, but you're right. And I wrote that down. What changed this woman that you just spoke about, her trajectory was asking the questions that she needed the answers to. Because when you're going into a team in your healthcare system who, let's just say you have a team and Angela, making up the name, is head of the team, whether they're clinical people or it doesn't make any difference. But when they're working with these people and they've been working with them for like a year, 5 years, 2 months, some people are a little bit embarrassed to pause and ask like a basic question about them. They're like, you know what? I should know that. I don't know how to get that information from them. I said, we can just ask them. And that is like the biggest aha moment. They're like, I can just go ask them how they want to receive information. I said, well, unless you think you're going to die from doing that, absolutely go try it. And like you said, it changes trajectory.
Yes. Yes. You brought that up in your book when you spoke about the going in and learning the leadership language of senior leadership.
Oh, yeah.
Because people are intimidated to go in and observe or just ask questions. And so you brought that to life, and it really encouraged people to perhaps make an effort to do that, because especially if they want to move up, like think about how they speak. You really brought that point home, Dr. Kim. Think about how they speak, learn the way they speak, and then tailor to the audience, correct? If you're speaking to them, mirror them.
I agree.
It was great. It was a good point.
And you know, how does someone who's a middle manager, which is a whole nother story, a friend of mine, Jeff Siegel, just wrote a book, The Middle Matters. And he is starting this middle management movement, which I love because it's so important. How does a middle manager who doesn't get the attention and the training and the development that higher level vice presidents get? They're already there. How much more fine tuning do they need? It's the people in the middle who don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And they don't know how the higher level executives speak. What's their leadership? No, it's like the mystery. It's the Wizard of Oz, you know, behind that curtain with those, right? The levers. Until he's exposed, you're like, oh my gosh, the Wizard of Oz is just a guy, right? He's just a guy. Well, guys. Just the people that are speaking in that leadership language, they're regular people. They're not all guys, but they're just regular people. But it's a big secret. Mm-hmm. No one knows what goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah. I also think, speaking to career development and becoming more visible, networking, you know, a vice president once told me your network determines your net worth. And I believe that's so true. So if you are at all intimidated with approaching a senior leader, or you need more to understand the big picture, work with mentors. There's peer mentors. There's other mentors that perhaps know some of these people that you'd want to talk to. And you can just reach out to them and prepare yourself so that you feel better than when you do go and ask questions from a senior leader. A mentor is so important.
It is. And okay, so let me just say, I wrote this down. I want to make sure I have it right. You said that the quote is, your network defines your net worth.
Determines.
Ooh, I'm going to get that tattooed right here. Right here. Okay. Anyone not, you're just listening. I'm looking at my forearm. I'm going to get that tattooed. All right. Determines. I love that. Okay. That is great. Oh, I love your quotes, Roz.
Well, they're not mine. I just heard them and absorbed them, and hopefully have applied some of them.
I love that. Okay. So let me ask you a question, because you are in charge of finding what's necessary as far as skills and competencies. And then you have to gather the information, and then you have to create programs and deliver them, which is a lot. That's a big charge for one person. That I know. Okay. So here's my question. Well, it's two-pronged again, but it's, what are the gaps? What are the gaps that you're seeing in how employees or employers, whatever, are engaging? And so how do you find the gaps, and do other people see what you're seeing? In other words, you've got that aerial view right now. So you're looking down saying, oh, there's a hairline fracture that's going to become a gaping hole with steam unless we address that in the development program.
Yes.
So are you seeing things, or are you hearing about things that dictate what you're going to actually put together in a program for development?
Okay. There's many answers to that, or there's many lanes to that question, Dr. Kim. Okay. But what I see in the future is that we really need to invest more time on virtual engagement. Okay. And I know you had a chapter on that.
Yes.
But where I see I see two things that could factor into that. Right now, we have a workforce that has the most generations in a workforce than we've ever had. Mm-hmm. And organizationally, there are idiosyncrasies between generations. Right. How you and I like to communicate versus how a generation alpha that's coming into the workforce down the road, or a generation Z, and their communication styles. So there could be a big gap in that, because if I'm addressing somebody that's a generation Z that I work with, and I am not applying some of their styles of learning, such as their digital natives, they like bite-sized feedback. And as a baby boomer myself, I like phone calls, and I like feedback, but it can be in paragraph form. If I'm not adapting to them, I will lose them. That will disengage instead of engage or re-engage. That's one area that I see, this whole generational styles. Also, I do host a session on the language of the listener, and it's all about communicating to somebody's style and type. They may be process-oriented, and I'm action-oriented.
Yes.
And that could be a big factor in disengagement, because as a color red, if I have somebody that's a process communicator spending too much time in details, I'll just disengage myself. So understanding the listener, understanding your audience, trying to read what their style is, or know what their style is, and adapt to it is mission critical. Those are two areas that I think could get wider, gaps that could get wider unless we address them proactively.
I agree. And I say this a couple times in my book, that first of all, if anyone reads my book and just follows the advice that I give, and in my final chapter is actually a case study of someone that I worked with over a year, who actually incorporated every single chapter topic into their work. And her name is Ash, and she is shy, which is different than being introverted. Shy is a little bit different. It's, it's painful for them to be in social situations. Introverts are not in pain, but shy people are. She actually did a 180. It was all about that mindset of looking at the audience. So here's a shameless plug, but it's true. It's a visual that my first book was called reLead, and it was about the guidance and encouragement toward leadership effectiveness. And that, just picture a person on a stage in an auditorium, and the spotlight is on the leader. So it's all about them. But reEngage is different toward what you're saying, because it's that same leader on the stage, but turning up the house lights. And that leader can now look at the audience and start to anticipate, how is that audience member, how are they viewing the person on stage?
Absolutely.
So I say in the book that you can actually walk into a situation and be prepared as a communicator and not know one person in the audience. And people are saying, how can you do that? It's toward what you just said, Roslyn, because if you anticipate that people are, and this is very easy peasy, introverts or extroverts, okay? If you anticipate that ahead of time, then you're not going to go in and speak in a way that only will appeal to extroverts or speak in a way that only appeals to introverts. We need to focus on the audience by focusing on ourselves. How are we delivering that information so that we know how it lands, right? One thing that you said, I'm going to bring it up. I wrote it down. Oh. So audience, and the first 2 tries of trying to get this podcast going today, Roz and I had time to talk, and she talked about something which I'm going to bring up because it was so brilliant, that I was asking Roslyn about what's the biggest issue that we're seeing right now, and all this information we have in leadership training, leadership development, employee training, employee development. And Roz talked about the pull through. Yes. Roz, I'm happy to speak to that.
Sure. Again, I lead our organizational culture is what I do. And we're trying to create a 5-star experience for our colleagues, patients, and families. So I do a lot of training to leaders and team members as well. Mm-hmm. But our charge with our annual training is to deliver to our directors, our senior leaders, our managers, and then they, in fact, deliver to their team members. And what we find happens is that whether it's a 1-hour training or a 3-hour training, it's just a blip on the wall until it is pulled through, until it is reinforced, until it is applied. And that's where we're seeing the biggest gap, is that we can deliver big to the leaders. They may understand it, but then they'll go out and there will be that gaping hole between what they now understand and know versus their teammates. And again, like I said, our workforce is large, and the teammates really need the same level of information to deliver big. And that's the pull through. We're not getting the pull through or the accountability of pulling through and a reinforcement to the degree we need it. Mm. And so we look for gaps in that, and then we will go back and try to work and co-facilitate with a leader, and then perhaps coach for accountability, so that they feel that they have the skills to do that.
Yep. Which is a whole different development training, correct? So here we are trying to fine-tune their skill set, their leadership skill set, which is fantastic. But again, leaders go back, and it's so funny when people say, well, I don't really know if engagement is really that important. And I said, well, when you come back from these training programs, whether it's a day long or a couple days long or a week long, what's the first thing that you do when you walk in, or when you get on camera, or when you walk into your organization and see your team? You engage.
Yes.
They don't see that as being the most, it's the most important thing. And toward what you're saying, that they need to engage with other people to make sure that it's landing. So here's Roslyn Clark creating and developing these fantastic programs. And then when it gets to the leader, they're learning it, but it stays with them.
Yes.
They're not implementing that.
We talk about that in leadership, and there's models on it that talk about 20% the first 20% is base camp, and leaders stay in base camp instead of climbing the summit. And the way to climb the summit is that whole manage by wandering around, engaging, getting connected with your teams. The more connected you are, the more they will want to engage and want to learn, and be the person that they want to go through firewalls for their leaders. So I think engagement is everything. It's everything.
It is everything. And also what I want to say to the leaders, because everyone thinks that their job is to lead, right? That's true. But what are they leading? Well, they're leading information. I personally believe, I say it in my book, that leaders all day long, what they do, they are relayers of information. That's what they do all day long. They're relaying information, whether it's the business at hand, whether it's where they're going for lunch, they're relaying information, whether it's them planning on how to develop their team, or even when they're engaging, they're relaying information all day long.
Yes.
But yet not everyone knows how to do that. A lot of leaders don't know what they don't know, and that does not make them bad people, and it does not make them bad leaders. But there's this gaping hole, right, with the steam coming out of it that we talked about, that they need to understand that they need to transfer that information in a way where it sticks. There's a lot of things that are not sticking, and people are paying a lot of money for really, really big programs, but it's not sticking. And I know what the answer to that is. I wrote a book about it, okay? Roslyn, I know that you know the answer to that because we spoke about that on one of our breaks in between trying to get this podcast to work, right? Just one other thing that you were talking about, I wrote down. Roz is full of such great information. Because I know that we're getting a little bit closer to the end of the podcast, but let's talk about this. And I want to talk about your statistics that you brought up. In case you forget about it, I wrote them down because I was wondering, okay, so we have all these things going on in learning and development. You know, we're still trying to fine tune skill sets, elevate people, helping them to level up, if you will.
Yes.
That's your job, Roz, and that's my job, right? Because we're coaching other people, we're teaching other people, but it's also incumbent upon a leader. They have a job as well, right? That they need to take that information, figure out a way that they're going to relay that.
Yes. Yes.
To all their team, not just one or two, like, the stars,
Correct.
Everyone sitting at the conference table. They need to figure out how to do that. And then I was asking Roslyn, I said, well, when we talk about the future, because everything we're doing is about the future, you're talking about alpha coming in and then betas after them. It's crazy. But we have to be prepared for that.
Yes.
So my question for you, Roslyn, because I know that you're doing what you can out there, but what are you seeing as far as our gap toward the future? What's the gaping hole that no one's really paying attention to as much as we should be?
Well, I think that, the virtual world that we're living in has created idiosyncrasies in engagement, because we have to learn how to engage differently, and it's only going to increase, such as we know today in today's market, and this is in your book, more than a third of the people, more than a third of the workforce is not engaged. Yeah. That's huge. And a lot of times if they are in an office environment or in a healthcare environment, we can still tap into those people and try to engage them and walk up to them and have face-to-face. In the virtual world, it's a little different. And the virtual world is growing to a degree that, over 58% of people said that they would take a 10% cut in pay to be able to stay at home full time and do remote work.
Right.
42% are doing that now, or they're doing some form of hybrid. So we need to be sure that we don't lose sight of how are we going to connect and stay engaged in a remote and virtual environment. And that's where I think our future lies, is to have the balance of both, to engage in a hybrid model. Right.
And first of all, I'm hoping that people can at least work in a hybrid situation. And I'll tell you why. And I say this in the book, and I say this to every single client, and everyone that knows me knows that I do this, that the first time I'm meeting with a client when we're behind closed doors, one-on-one, first thing I say to them, are you an introvert or an extrovert? So that's my unscientific question I ask everyone, because that tells me exactly how to proceed with them. So for instance, I don't even get the word extrovert out. And people are like, I'm an extrovert. They'll tell me that. So that's easy. But people who sometimes are, when they're introverts, or if they're not sure, they'll say, well, I'm not really sure. And my unscientific question is, do you like to go to parties? And they'll say, oh, I hate parties, which tells me they're introvert. Or I'll go to a party, but I really want to, just kind of stay back and watch everyone. Tells me they're an introvert. So that tells me, because I'm a triple type A extrovert, and I know that, but I'll tell you what, in a nanosecond, I can acquiesce to whatever personality type people are. So people, and the majority of people in the world, and I know there's a lot of different studies on this, but the needle goes that there's more extroverts in the world than introverts. So that being said, I got news for you, my friends. And Roslyn, you're an extrovert?
Yes.
Yeah. So guess what we do? We draw our energy from people.
Yes.
So if we're not around people, we wilt on a vine. Introverts love working from home. And I understand that, right? Because they need to recharge, and I get that. But a hybrid actually is the best of both worlds. But when we have people who are in remote workplaces, I understand that, especially working parents. I get that with daycare. I get that completely. I never had the benefit of that. I sat in the traffic, the expressway in Philadelphia for almost a decade. With their construction, I was late all the time. But anyway, right? I remember those, But I will say that the people who work remote, I understand it's more convenient for them. What I am concerned about is the mental well-being of people who don't have access, physical access to people. It's great to be on screen. I get that. I do. But toward what you're saying, Roslyn, it is so important. And I do have a chapter on working in a virtual environment. Really important, because we need to, just like COVID happened overnight.
Yes.
Right. And leaders, literally, the rug was pulled out from us and the whole globe. And then in that free fall, we were actually great about, oh, that's okay. You know what? We'll have our meetings at 10 o'clock and not 9 o'clock, until people start showing up in their pajamas, until someone let their cat sit in front of the remote through their camera, through their entire virtual meeting. And the list goes on. The people, we became a little bit lazier, and that's not a bad thing, but it is when you're burping on camera with your team and everyone's laughing. As a leader, I would feel like I lost control.
Absolutely. Just out of respect. And you speak to that in your book, Dr. Kim, about showing up at work, showing up at work virtually in a virtual environment and still have that professional demeanor is so important. Yes. Because again, we are projecting. If I'm seeing somebody on camera that has their cat and they're in a shirt that's not appropriate, it tells me a lot about, are they respecting their work as much there as they might be in the office? Who are they? So right. I think that professionalism needs to be consistent, whether you're virtual or in-house.
It's true. And I'm also an image consultant. So I tell people, dress for a virtual meeting as you would if you were going into the office, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I hear the stories where people, and I list them. I list all the excuses. I didn't brush my teeth. I didn't comb my hair. It's 2 o'clock. I didn't take a shower yet. And the list goes on. I'm thinking, you wouldn't dare say that sitting in a conference room of your organization. What gives us license to do that on a virtual meeting? Because it's still, we're still meeting, right? It's still engagement, and you're still being judged. And that's not a bad thing. Being like, do I want to comb my hair every morning? Well, I do. Do I want to wear makeup? Yeah, actually I do. But the point is, though, there's a lot of people who could care less about that. So if you're showing up with me and you look terrible, first of all, I am empathetic that things can happen. I get that. But when it's on a repeated basis, I'm thinking, wow, when we're looking at people for succession planning, and Roslyn, you talked about succession planning with me before, are they going to be looking at an individual who really doesn't care about how they show up on camera? Is that really a leader? Can it be a leader? Yeah. Can leaders do that? Sure. But again, organizations want to hire people who want to put their best foot forward for the organization. And that's not a bad thing.
Correct.
It is not a bad thing. Am I right, Roslyn?
Absolutely. We do a lot of work around first impressions, because you can make it twice. And now in a virtual world, the first time you show up on camera just looking so disheveled, that's what sticks in someone's mind. And like you said, sometimes there's a mishap, but if you do that consistently, the image is different than if you were showing up in a conference room. Yes.
No, it's true. So anyway, for anyone who's listening out, looking at this, okay. So I'm just leaning to the side right now, and just really, and I'm pretending that I'm eating. If I were doing a podcast like this and just really look bored, I mean, you would be bored with me, as you should be, right? Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, I do think that we need to show up in a way that's not just appropriate. I mean, we want to be appropriate, but it's inviting for other people too.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Body language. We speak about body language. Body language and tone of voice is 93% of communication.
Yes. No, 7% is not. 93% of our communication is body language. Is that unbelievable?
Unbelievable. It is unbelievable. And you can, and the other 7%, the words, really, do you invite someone in or do you shut the door?
Yeah.
And that's so important. Oh
my goodness.
Yes. So image, that body language starts with image and what you're projecting and just how you just spoke about leaning to the side and eating or multitasking. It says a lot about communication.
Right. And I just think it really shows how we feel about ourselves. Hey, we all have dark times and dark places. I get that. I do. But I just would be remiss. I'm saying this personally for my audience. I would be remiss if I brought that to the table, especially doing a podcast. I just don't know if that's something that you're signing up for. You understand? Yeah. So anyway, well, Roslyn, is there any final thoughts that you have? I mean, any advice, any Roslyn Clark phrases or words or thoughts or suggestions that you can share with us? You've been amazing and so generous with all of your tips, and I know I appreciate it.
I don't know if I have any true words of wisdom. All I can say is, regardless if you're an introvert, an extrovert, a leader, or just team member, make a point to engage, make a point to connect, because connection is everything. Yeah. Connection truly is everything. And in our world of healthcare, it builds trust and relationships. And trust is so important in healthcare. So the only way to do that is engage. So I would just say, do whatever you can. And really, truly, this book is a great read. And it just reinforces so much of what I teach and some of the pearls I've seen along the way. So Dr. Kim, I thank you so much. I am so glad we connected because this really does have a lot of great wisdom to it.
Oh, thank you, Roslyn. And what really makes me happy, I see that you have a lot of pages tabbed.
Yes.
Like feathers. I love that. That's the ultimate compliment. It really is.
Yes.
So, it's funny when we talk about all the things that we have to do toward leadership development. And again, you're the practitioner, but you're also the leader in developing these programs and relaying that to all the folks in your healthcare system. But sometimes when we think about all the things that we have to think of as leaders, how do we even get out of bed every day? All the things that we have to think about and do and say and not say and be careful of, and the rules and the regulations, it's a lot.
It is. I say always go back to your why, because our days are transactional and they're met with crisis and fires. If you go back to your why and the mission of why you're doing what you're doing, it is easy to put that first step in front of the other when you get out of bed.
Yeah, I remember how you opened this podcast when we talked about nice to know, need to know. And I could just feel it come from your toes. You were talking about, the vibe of how passionate you are. And I know that. I can see that. I can feel that. And I know the audience can too. So I just wanted to say just the biggest thank you for joining the podcast. I definitely want to have you back in the future. You've been so interesting and so much fun to deal with. So I thank you for that. And for everyone else, I just wanted to close in the way that I always do with everyone, that I always say, and I say it in my books, that life is short and careers are shorter, right? And I just think it's really important for all of us to be, to heighten our awareness of ourselves along our career journey. And Roz talked a lot about having a mentor. If you have a coach, if you have someone that you can talk to, that'll give you honest feedback, they're gold, okay? And they're gonna help you move forward in your career if you think about things like focusing inward, your leadership effectiveness, or when you focus outward and looking at your audience, which is actually what my second book is all about. It will change your trajectory as you move forward. So until our next episode, stay tuned. We have a lot of really great guests coming up until our next episode. But I wanted to thank you. I want to tell everyone to go out there and be a reLeader and go out there and be a reEngager. So thank you, Roslyn Clark, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you kindly, Dr. Kim.